Thanks, Ross, and thank you for joining me. Tonight, the Albanese government runs scared from tackling runaway immigration with a new policy, but instead it trots out Chris Bowen and more energy self-harm. Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price will join me. The Victorian Corruption Commission reveals how the Victorian Labor government ignored processes, conventions and codes of conduct. That State's Shadow Attorney General James Newbury will join us on that topic. Innocents killed in the Ukraine war and Britain battling more boatloads of illegal immigrants. I'll talk to Tom Switzer and cross to Sophie Ellsworth in London. And on the Wednesday Wrangle, James and Justin will review Kevin Rudd's latest words of wisdom. Let's get cracking. Talk about an immigration crisis. The Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke was planning to announce a new policy tomorrow at the National Press Club with cuts to migration numbers, but he hit a roadblock in Cabinet, reportedly, and the announcement's been delayed. Labor just can't handle immigration and border protection, can they? The left scream whenever anyone raises the national interest rather than some dream about a John Lennon world with no countries and no borders. Anyway, today we got another Labor luminary at the Press Club, the Climate and Energy Minister, Chris Bowen. It served to show us how deluded he is and how misguided Labor is on this energy stuff. Putting climate and energy together in the one portfolio is the first sign of madness. We need cheap, reliable power for our prosperity and a secure future. The climate change debate is something else entirely. But not for Bowen. He's intent on continuing to destroy our cheap energy advantage because he likes to pretend that by fiddling with Australia's 1% and falling share of growing global emissions, we can save the planet from climate change. Not logical, not scientific, not rational, not doable. But that doesn't stop Blackout Bowen. Let me just share a few of his delusional statements and give you a reality check on each one of them.
Coal isn't baseload anymore. It's an unreliable asset. Every time coal breaks down, your bills go up.
This is only because government policy for most of the past 2 decades has been directed at forcing coal out and ensuring there's no more investment in coal. Coal and gas provided more than 60% of the national electricity grid power today, as they do most days. Solar fails every night, and each wind turbine fails about 2/3 of the time.
The pace of our energy transition will only serve to further insulate us from the global energy insecurity, which is not getting any better.
Absolute nonsense. Australia has more than enough coal and gas and uranium, for that matter, to power ourselves for centuries. Wind, solar and batteries are almost entirely reliant on imports from China, components that are often made with our iron ore and coal. Still generating emissions, of course, into the atmosphere of this planet, only from China rather than here. So China gets the jobs and profits too.
While neither hydrogen or offshore wind play a role in our 82% target, the cost curve for both hasn't come down as quickly as was predicted a few years ago.
Bowen has spent years spruiking offshore wind farms, overriding the concerns of coastal communities. He and Anthony Albanese have also banged on endlessly about a green hydrogen revolution and thrown billions of dollars of our tax dollars at that scheme. We've called out this mindless malarkey from the start. Now they face failure. Energy policy on feelings and ideology instead of rational decisions about what works and what doesn't.
We want an energy system that is stronger and doesn't cost consumers more. That's the test we've set, and that's the one we'll hold to.
Hang on, that's the test you've set. We used to have an electricity grid that was reliable, robust and cheap, even by global standards. Labor has made it more fragile and unreliable than ever, and much more expensive than this country has seen before.
The impacts of climate change are the number 1, 2 and 3 issues for the Pacific Islands. They look to Australia for leadership, And under this government, we will reciprocate with action.
More bunkum. The top 3 issues for Pacific nations actually are their economies, their health and their education. So Bowen is just playing political games here, distracting from what really matters for our Pacific neighbours. And this next clip shows just how ridiculous this stuff gets.
I've stood at the most narrow point of Tuvalu and seen the impact of rising seas. Some people deny it. We know it's real. And the very existence of these countries is at stake.
Really? He wants to run the old disappearing countries line again? Let's check the science. A number of studies have shown the low-lying island nation of Tuvalu is actually growing. A University of Auckland study examined 9 atolls and 101 reef islands between 1971 and 2014 using aerial photographs and satellite imagery. It found 8 of the atolls and almost 3/4 of the islands grew during the study period, lifting Tuvalu's total land mass by 2.9%, even though sea levels rose at twice the global average. Never let the facts get in the way of a good story, hey, Minister. These are the inconvenient facts. Even over at the ABC, where they desperately want this stuff not to be true, they ran a fact check and found that, guess what? It checks out. Tuvalu is actually growing, not being swallowed by rising oceans. So that's it. Pretty much nothing Bowen had to say today reflected reality. He's now planning to spend even more of your tax dollars subsidising solar. So the main message from Bowen today is that under him and Albanese, our national energy self-harm will accelerate with reckless abandon. The ABC is still refusing to apologise to Gina Rinehart and still has its grotesque abuse of her available to view on the Race Around the World program on its iView platform. I sent questions to the ABC chairman, Kim Williams, today, asking whether he believed Rinehart was owed an apology, and if not, why not? But he refused to comment. This stonewalling from the ABC is counterproductive. I guarantee you they will apologise eventually. They have to. The public demands it. It should have happened a week or so ago. Chris Bowen was actually asked about it at the press club today, and like all Labor MPs, he struggled to state the obvious.
I haven't seen the clip that you're referring to. It's not a show that I watch. But I've read the reports, and if the reports I've read are right, which I assume they are, then it is not appropriate. It should not have aired, and the ABC should take appropriate action. But, you know, no Australian, even an Australian I profoundly disagree with, like Mrs Rinehart, should be subject to that sort of commentary.
Should the ABC apologise? Well,
again, they should take appropriate action, up to and including considering the message they should send to Mrs Rinehart. Now, I'm not on the board of the ABC. The Minister of Communications isn't even not on the board of the ABC. But we're a, you know, I believe in decent, respectful debate and civil discourse, and that was not that. And if the clip was as I read it is, then yes, I would expect an apology.
Good Lord, they're pathetic. The first thing you do is click on and have a look at it, as we all did when it first became an issue. But Labor's just all in a bind over this stuff. It's actually very, very easy. Taxpayers fund the ABC. They don't fund it to provide foul abuse of its ideological targets. Under law, the ABC is supposed to operate with a keen eye on fairness, balance and quality debate. The Communications Minister should demand the ABC apologise. And more than that, the Prime Minister himself should demand that the ABC apologise unequivocally and undertake to stop doing this sort of thing. We're seeing an absence of leadership at the ABC and in the Prime Minister's office. Now, who should bob up on the ABC last night but Australia's greatest ever Prime Minister? Just ask him, Kevin Rudd. And he was asked about the rise of One Nation, now outpolling not only the Coalition but Labor too. Rudd's response was pretty revealing. Just listen to the issues that Rudd tells us One Nation is ill-equipped to tackle and ask yourself how well Labor's been handling them.
Well, it's very easy to play the politics of protest. It's very hard to do the grinding business of government, which looks after practical problems of national security, such as you and I have been discussing here this evening, of the economy and growing it, environmental sustainability so that we don't all exhaust and expire the planet through climate change, and delivering, basic services for the Australian people, including housing affordability, which has been eating away so badly at people's standard of living over a long period of time. The hard business of government is to come up with practical responses to each of those challenges. The easy business of politics is simply to act as a protest vector and then lace it and spice it with the politics of race. That's what Mrs Hanson's been doing ever since she emerged in my fair state of Queensland a quarter of a century ago. Her script hasn't changed. But ask this question of yourselves. What single answer does she have to any of the list of problems and challenges which I went through before? Zip is the answer to that.
Zip. Well, OK, let's go through his stuff like we do with Chris Bowen. One Nation as a protest party, fair enough. But that's precisely because there's plenty to protest against. National defence, he lists. Wow, how's Labor doing there? Dud subs, slow on drones, military short on for recruits, government not standing up to Chinese intimidation, but instead having people like Rudd bagging our main security ally, the US. The question really is, could anyone do worse? Then Rudd talks about growing the economy. Labor's given us this deficits up, debt up, taxes up, immigration at record levels, spending at record highs, inflation up, interest rates up, and the economy barely growing. He reckons One Nation couldn't do as well as that? I'd hope not. Then we get the old exhaust and expire the planet nonsense. Well, guess what, Mr Rudster? According to the science, destroying our electricity grid and manufacturing base and rural industries won't make a jot of difference to the global climate. And he mentions basic services. Has he noticed hospital waiting lists, the state of the roads and public transport? Probably not from the US. And housing affordability? He seriously says One Nation would have to prove themselves on housing affordability? Mate, it's a full-blown crisis now under Labor. Then he throws in the tired old racism slur. Yeah, we always see that with One Nation. And in the end, he says Pauline Hanson and One Nation have zip idea when it comes to fixing any of this. He might be right. Who knows? But we do know for sure that Labor has no idea. The reason One Nation is so popular at the moment is because Rudd, and now Albo, and too often the coalition in between as well, have all had zip idea either, and zip success on the key issues, especially on economic management. So Rudd's list, sadly, is actually a list of major party failures that highlights exactly why One Nation is surging. Just before I go on with the rest of the program, I want to share with you part of an interview that I'm going to bring you tomorrow night. With talks about the future of Gaza occurring this week between the so-called Board of Peace and the Israeli government, there is renewed hope that Hamas might eventually be convinced to disarm to give Palestinians another chance at peace. So I've caught up with Ahmed Al-Khatib, who grew up in Gaza and now lives in the US. He's very clear about who's destroyed life for Gazans.
I very much so believe that Hamas and the Islamist groups and the terror groups are a clear and a present existential threat to the people of Gaza. And I'm speaking specifically about Gaza. I think my family would still be alive. Tens of thousands of Palestinians would still be alive. Most of Gaza would not be destroyed if Hamas had simply made different choices on October 7th.
That interview here tomorrow night. Don't miss it. Now, the most secretive corruption investigation in Victorian history has found that Daniel Andrews' government engaged in serious and concerning conduct in its dealings with the Firefighters Union and failed to respect processes, conventions and codes of conduct. The union boss, Peter Marshall, has responded by attacking the Commission.
What we're seeing here is a very much creative writing. But let's talk about rights. I back about enforcing rights in the community and indeed making sure community expectations are upheld. Tell me, would you like your phone calls monitored by strangers when you're actually having a discussion with your wife, having a discussion with your partner, having a discussion with your medical practitioner? Would you like your home raided and every document, nothing to do with enterprise agreement, seized by IBAC, kept by IBAC, personal records? Would you like that?
Let's go to Melbourne now and catch up with Victoria's Shadow Attorney General, James Newbury. Thanks for joining us, James. I wonder if you could kick off. There was no direct finding of corruption here, so just summarise for us what the Corruption Commission's findings were against the Andrews government.
Well, I don't think this is going to be breaking news for the watchers tonight, but this government is rotten. It's been rotten under Daniel Andrews. It was rotten under Jacinta Allen. And guess what? It's still rotten under Ben Carroll. And I think one of the most damning things of this report is his hand-picked secretary. Ben Carroll's hand-picked secretary has been found, well, very, very damning. Very damning finding it's against him. And guess what? He's still in the job. Taxpayers are paying for him to be in that job. And you say to yourself, OK, so where's the Premier been today to explain why his most senior bureaucrat is still in the job? He's been hiding all day. The Premier hasn't even come out to explain why this guy's still in his job.
You would have thought it was something that requires a detailed response from the Premier, Ben Carroll. He's only been in the job a week, of course. Here's what he did have to say.
It is intolerable. I will take action. I will accept the recommendations and get on with implementing them. We will pass legislation to give IBAC the powers that it has been asking for, and that is what I'm doing.
And James, we've also heard from Daniel Andrews today rejecting these findings.
Daniel Andrews, who this Premier is building a statue for, don't forget about that one. We're in Victoria paying a couple of $100,000, which was what it'll end up costing, to build a godlike statue to this guy. I mean, how perverse. We've got IBAC findings saying Daniel Andrews, well, we all know about Daniel Andrews, and we're footing the bill for a statue. We're also footing a bill for a guy who's one of the most senior public bureaucrats in this state, who's been found to have failed the integrity test. I tell you what, in Victoria, it's rotten. It's just rotten from the top to the bottom.
Look, I think that's clear to anybody who's been paying any attention from around the country. Of course, you know, Ben Carroll, there's an attempt there to have a new face and to start ahead. I like to call it the year zero strategy. They'll try and pretend that anything that happened before last week has got nothing to do with him. So you mentioned his hand-picked secretary. What are the links between Ben Carroll and the decisions and the operations that were made under that were investigated in this inquiry?
Well, the person I'm speaking about who's central to this report was then put in by Ben Carroll as head of his own department. So as this investigation was ongoing, this fellow was put in to head Ben Carroll's department. And what he then said in the interview you played shortly thereafter was, but I haven't read any of the detail. I can't speak to the detail of the report because I haven't read it. You know, what this government has been good at in the past is spin and frankly, tricking Victorians, because Victorians are good people. They think when, you know, someone stands up and says something, they mean it. But I think what we've all learned in Victoria is it's all spin. And corruption, $15 billion of corruption on government projects is just now, I mean, it's core business in Victoria. Like, I mean, corruption is at the core of everything. and it's time to clean it up. We've got to fix Victoria.
Well, this is the here and now, right? You've got to have this Royal Commission into construction to look at the big build. Ben Carroll said he'll deliver that Royal Commission. You know, on the cusp of an election, you'll see no evidence brought out before the election. What's the process here? How are you going to get a commission that the opposition is happy with, or should it wait till after the election?
Look, we don't think Labor will ever deliver a Royal Commission that's anything else other than a sham. I mean, we've said people like Daniel Andrews and Jacinta Allen, Ben Carroll must appear before the Royal Commission. He wouldn't even commit to that. You know, the absolute basics. I've said it has to absolutely look at what donations the Labor Party received, what union money went through to Labor, because if corrupted money went to unions and then back to Labor through, you know, the slush fund, we deserve to know about it. He wouldn't even commit to these basics. No one should believe that Labor will ever conduct a Royal Commission in any way that will get to the bottom of the corruption and crimes that I suspect have occurred. Only we can, and only we will. And I can tell you, we will deliver the toughest Royal Commission I think Australia's ever seen.
Fascinating times, James. Thanks for joining us. James Newbury there, the Shadow Attorney-General in Victoria. That election, of course, due in November. We're going to take a break. On the other side, we're going to check in on what's become a bit of a forgotten war, with innocents being killed on both sides in the Ukraine war. Tom Switzer will join me. Russia has been accused of a war crime by Ukraine after a street vendor was stalked and then attacked by a drone. The man suffered shrapnel wounds, concussion and shock from the attack, but survived. The video was shared by Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky on Telegram. Let's bring in Tom Switzer, columnist with The Australian. Good to see you, Tom. This is one of those minor incidents in a war that gets a lot of attention globally. First of all, it reminds us that this war is going on and the impact Ukraine's having as well, because just the other day, a Ukraine drone crashed on the beach, into the beach of the Black Sea, killing 7 innocent Russians. So innocents are getting wounded and killed here on both sides.
Well, look, both sides are playing hardball to inflict maximum damage on each other so that they relent. And the reality is that Russia will continue to play hardball because they will want to ensure that Ukraine does not become a Western bulwark on its borders. And as for the Ukrainians, they're fighting for dear life. They want their 20% of their land back.
Yeah, there's a massive power imbalance between the two countries, but Ukraine's been able to inflict an enormous amount of damage across the border in Moscow and elsewhere.
The power of drone warfare.
Yeah.
You know, about a year or two ago, there was a consensus view emerging that Ukraine was in all sorts of trouble, but the drone warfare has certainly changed things. But the reality on the ground, Chris, is that Russia is slowly but surely moving further westwards, and they have 20% of Ukraine, and they have control, obviously, of the Crimean Peninsula, which is the home of the Russian Black Sea Fleet.
What about the patience of the NATO countries and the US for defending Ukraine? Presumably that holds up because even if there's no prospect of a settlement, because they want the battlefield there rather than closer to home.
Well, that's one interpretation. The other interpretation is that Russia is a declining great power, that it's already bogged down in Donbass and it's incapable of trying to impose its will and leadership across Eastern and Central Europe. I mean, the whole notion that Putin wants to revive the Russian Empire, I think, is overstated. What's happened here, and this is a minority view, admittedly, is that Russia wants to make sure, as I said before, Ukraine does not become a Western bulwark on its borders. Yep. And they see NATO expansion as a threat to its strategic sensibilities.
I want to bring you back to Australian defence and foreign policy, and the Assistant Defence Minister or Defence Industry Minister, Pat Conroy, said this on the ABC the other day.
Submarine Rotation Force West is due to come to an end in the early 2030s.
I just want to understand that. Are you saying that US submarines will not be passing through Stirling after 2032?
The current plan for Submarine Rotation Force West is that it's a 5-year commitment beginning in 2027, and that when we're sovereign ready and receive our own Virginias, Submarine Rotation Force West is due to end. So this is a 5-year commitment.
This was extraordinary because that news was new to the Pentagon and new even to his own government.
And he's in Washington when he makes the statement. I mean, Greg Sheridan, our colleague, wrote a very good column in the Australian newspaper yesterday, that is Tuesday, just absolutely beside himself about how incoherent and incompetent the Labor government has been on this subject. Now,
the point is he's completely wrong.
He is wrong.
US will be and Australia has agreed that US submarines will continue to use that port in perpetuity.
Well, it was left to the Defence Minister, who I think is a political grown-up, Richard Marles. He came through to mop up the damage and reaffirmed what the line is. Look, there are two ways of looking at this. One view is that Anthony Albanese, who is the disciple of Tom Uren, the anti-American Labor minister in the Whitlam government, Anthony Albanese, both in opposition and in government, has done the right thing by keeping in place the foreign policy settings, AUKUS, the Quad, all designed to essentially contain China. It doesn't say that, but that's essentially what this is about.
Yeah.
So he deserves credit there. But on the other hand, he and some of his ministers have been completely incoherent about what AUKUS means, how long it's going to last for.
Well, he deserves credit for doing... I suppose you look at it the other way, because if he undercut this deal, it would be one of the worst decisions by an Australian government ever, right? But you get to the heart of the matter, and that is that you have some sort of right faction grown-ups in the government. You think of Don Farrell, you think of Richard Marles, but it's essentially run by the socialist left, Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese. It's not in their instincts to support the US alliance and a future deal like AUKUS.
Well, traditionally speaking, the left wing of the ALP has opposed the US alliance, opposed all the various initiatives to enhance military cooperation, even at the height of the Cold War. So it's not surprising. But what is interesting, though, is that Albo, a man of the left, a disciple of Tom Uren, he is keeping faith with AUKUS.
He is.
So that's worth recognising, despite the nonsense of Pat Conroy.
But it worries me because it's so clearly not a natural fit for many in the Labor Party. But
the Greg Sheridan column's worth reading. It was very good.
It sure is. Don't plug Greg's column, plug my column. How's the river? No, and yours. Thanks very much. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks, Chris.
We're going to get to a break. On the other side, we're going to cross to the UK, where Britain's now battling more boatloads of illegal immigrants. So I'll cross to Sophie Osworth. Don't go away. Let's go to London and catch up with News Corp European correspondent and News24 contributor, of course, Sophie Osworth. Good to talk to you, Sophie. I want to get to your reports first up on this latest disaster. It could have been a tragedy with 173 illegal immigrants trying to get across from Europe to Britain, all rescued, thankfully, as there's trouble with the boat. But, geez, it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, great to be with you, Chris. Look, this was absolutely shocking scenes yesterday near the English border. And as we know, many English vessels intervened to rescue these illegal migrants trying to get into the UK. Now, Chris, you know I love showing our viewers the front page, but we've got the front pages here today of the Daily Express saying, how many more lives will you risk by doing nothing? Now, this is really a warning to British Prime Minister Andy Burnham that something must be done. Now, he's only been in office a few weeks. He's been very silent on this issue, Chris. He's now on holidays, and we've got these disasters unfolding, and it shows that the UK is still, all these years on, unable to get control of its borders.
Yeah, and it's an important point. That headline was very important, I think, because when you think back to the Australian debate, that sort of turned the tide for a lot of people who were sort of weak on this issue, thinking, oh, everyone who wants to get in deserves a chance here. When they understood just how dangerous the people smuggling business was and how many lives were being lost or put at risk, it helped them understand that there's all sorts of reasons that border security matters and makes sense. And Nigel Farage has been focusing on Australia's success in this area, saying that he might follow our lead down that path. Here he is.
They tried offshore processing. They tried a number of things, and in the end what worked was towing the boats back to Indonesia. And since then, hardly a boat has landed in Australia. I am entirely confident that under a Reform government, within a fortnight, there would be no more boats.
Yeah, I think he's got that slightly wrong there, because it was the whole suite of policies, including the towbacks, that worked. But certainly those strong policies worked. The thing is that, Sophie, the Conservatives in the UK have looked at Australia's policies. It even had Alexander Downer helping them out to devise these policies. But they even had that Rwanda option. But they've never been able, neither Conservative or Labor governments, to enforce proper border security.
And this is the problem, Chris, on both sides of the political spectrum, neither governments, past or present, have been able to take control of this. And this is where Nigel Farage is really ramming home this issue and winning in the polls. He's now back on top of the polls after being behind Labor last week by a point. But this is the hot button issue here in the UK. And Chris, it is quite astounding that you can just roll in on a boat here, be put up in accommodation, given money, given services, and live here freely for quite some time without really any identification in some cases. It is a serious, serious problem, and the UK cannot get control of this.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. The politics of this are obvious. The major parties are failing. A reform offers a different approach. It's so important. And, of course, we saw in Morocco, in the Spanish enclave there, on Morocco, on North Africa, again, a reminder of just how crucial this stuff is. You need the right laws, and you need the right policies, and you need the right military and security power behind it.
You do indeed, Chris, and there's concerns after those scenes we saw in Morocco and Spain last week with tens of thousands of migrants crossing into Ceuta. There's concerns that they would eventually come through into Britain, but Britain cannot control its borders, and it's been very weak on this issue. It's been unable to get a handle of it. And it's pretty fair to say, Chris, Britons are fed up to the back teeth of this issue.
Yeah, I bet they are. And in this climate, I've got to ask you about this, so I can't quite believe this. I hope you can explain it for us. But in this climate, with so much going on, with so many important issues to deal with, and a new Prime Minister barely with his boots under the desk, he's apparently going on 2 weeks' leave, a 2-week holiday. How come?
Well, Chris, he's off this week. He's off for a week. He's only been in office 2 weeks. Now, August is pretty much like our January in Australia. Everything shuts down. Parliament's closed. It's in recess until September. It is a good time to take a break. But, Chris, if you're the top dog in an organisation, if you're the top dog in the country, you would expect after 2 weeks you're still in the job. No one is denying that Andy Burnham should have a holiday. But it doesn't look great optics when we've got people rolling in.
Not now.
We've got rolling in, Chris.
Yeah.
That we've got illegal migrants arriving, and he's somewhere with his feet up and his bathers on and kicking back and maybe drinking mojitos. It's not a good look.
It's not a good look at all. He could be up at Chequers, of course, the prime ministerial sort of rural retreat. He could be there having meetings and telling everyone he's formulating policy to try and fix the joint, but he's off drinking mojitos, as you say. Unbelievable. Thanks for joining us, Sophie. Appreciate it. Thanks. Sophie Ellsworth, brilliant as ever there, live from London. Let's go live to Alice Springs now and catch up with Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price. She's the Shadow Small Business Minister. Great to catch up with you, Jacinta. First up, in your portfolio area, really, the Labor government now putting out there the revisions to its budget tax measures, getting rid of things like the widow's tax and discretionary trust taxes, supposedly fixing these unintended consequences of their budget madness. So what's your response? Had a look at it yet?
Oh, look, Chris, this is demonstrable of a government, a pig-headed government that decides to create policy that hasn't been well thought through, where consultation hasn't taken place, and they've taken a ham-fisted approach to just ram it through. They had every opportunity at the last sitting week that we had in Canberra in Parliament to do the right thing, to not ram these policies, this legislation through, and to fix the issues of widow tax, but they'd been warned. We already told them of the consequences of what it might mean to those in these vulnerable situations, to those in domestic violence situations, and how they would be impacted by these policies. But they didn't listen, because they didn't want to listen, because they obviously know what's best. And now they're scrambling to do a patch-up job. and they're patting themselves on the back for it at the same time, as if to say, well, we knew this was going to be the case. If they knew, why do it in the first place? This is not how you should govern a country.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. And, of course, the real estate market is in turmoil and latest projections suggesting that's going to get a lot worse. I want to get you on immigration as well, because obviously the coalition has toughened up its immigration policies under Angus Taylor. One Nation have been ringing the alarm bells about immigration for some time. Labor admits that its immigration levels have been too high, and Tony Burke was going to announce a new policy tomorrow, but he's backed out of it. So obviously there are plenty of socialist left members of cabinet who don't like clamping or reducing our immigration intake.
Well, again, it's those socialist members of their cabinet that are helping to destroy this country. And this is just, again, demonstrates a government that is divided behind the closed doors. They're divided. They don't know what they want to press forward with or not. You know, how embarrassing that Tony Burke, as the minister, had to pull out of his National Press Club address at the last minute. You know, and as it is right now, there are more than 2.8 million temporary visa holders since the end of June. We know that immigration is having a detrimental impact on our country, on our infrastructure, on our services. And this government has created that problem to the point where it is now. So it's no wonder once more they're scrambling to try and find solutions and come up with the right solutions. But evidently there are those that want to continue down the path that we're currently going down. I mean, it's why we've warned them as a coalition. We've warned them. It's why we will ensure that we will bring about immigration that is sustainable for our country. That speaks to the fact that we need those coming to our country who are going to fill the appropriate gaps in terms of skill that we need where there's shortages, but also make sure that places like the regional Australia and the Northern Territory don't miss out on those with the skills that we need in this country. But this government, they're realising all their chickens are coming home to roost right now, and this is so evident before us.
Yeah, and related to all that is social cohesion. I just want to get your thoughts on what we've seen at the Bondi Royal Commission over the past couple of days. I highlighted this last night with Alex Rivchin, but you've got the situation where lawyers for the Palestinian protesters are actually questioning Jewish Australians about the policies of the Israeli government in Gaza, almost as if they're trying to justify the horrific protest at the Opera House and the sorts of things we've seen since. Have a listen to Dominic Toomey, one of these lawyers.
I want to suggest to you that you have seen nothing that has emanated from the organisers of the rally, namely the Palestine Action Group, which would suggest in any way that the rally was being convened to celebrate those despicable attacks.
Now, that's another point, which I'll come to in a moment. But first up, where they're interrogating the Jewish people about the policies in the Middle East, how could that possibly justify the hatred we've seen on the streets here?
Yeah, look, it's disgusting. I mean, David Ossip was right to bring the inquiry back to what its central purpose was, which is about ensuring that the rates of anti-Semitism that we're hearing from witnesses, the Jewish witnesses in our communities that are now fearful to send their own children to school in their uniforms, for crying out loud. This is fundamentally what it is about. This is not about those opportunists to make this about a running commentary of foreign military or a conflict taking place in the Middle East or the history of the Middle East. This is not what this is about. This is about anti-Semitism in our country, in Australia, and the fact that it needs to be taken away. It needs to be it needs to be brought to the surface, to the light, and the right thing needs to be done by the Jewish community in our country, and not an opportunity for these activist types to attempt to make excuses for the horrible behaviour which occurred 2 days after the October 7 attacks.
And for Dominic Toomey there to suggest that there's no evidence there was any sense of celebration, that was the whole tone of everything about that protest at the Opera House. It was celebrating the slaughter of Israelis and threatening Jews in Australia. And you only had to go to the previous night with Sheikh to Doon in Lakemba, saying this was a night of victory, a night of triumph. He was most overtly celebrating. So they're living in an alternative universe, and I wonder how the Royal Commissioner could allow her commission to be a place to amplify this sort of hatred.
Precisely right, Chris. I mean, the Royal Commission is not there to allow for the activist class to gaslight Jewish people in this country, to utilise the Royal Commission for this purpose at all. We've had enough of it. We've had a gutful of it. It cannot continue, and you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be used in this particular form, in this particular way. And as I said, the Jewish people of our country deserve a hell of a lot more than this level of conduct. That is blatant anti-Semitism as far as I'm concerned, and there is no place for it in our country.
Thanks for joining us, Jacinta. I appreciate it. Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price there, joining us live from Alice Springs. We're going to take a break. On the other side of that, we'll have the Wednesday Wrangle with James and Justin. We'll get their thoughts on Kevin Rudd's latest words of wisdom. Let's get into the Wednesday Wrangle, and joining us from the corrupt state of Victoria is columnist Justin Smith, broadcaster and author as well. And on the desk here with me is a digital guru, James Bolt, who's a refugee from the corrupt state of Victoria.
Yeah, I made it out of there, so that's good.
Yeah, you're both Richmond supporters, so that's nothing to be excited about at the moment either. Give us your thought.
I don't know what's worse, being a Richmond supporter or a Victorian. It's hard to pick.
What do you make of all that the corruption stuff? That not quite corruption stuff, Justin.
Yeah, it falls a bit short, doesn't it? It's incredible. I think one of the things there about they're sort of firing a few shots at the union heavyweights like Peter Marshall. If you are Peter Marshall and you've got the opportunity to sit down with the government and do a deal and the deal is in your favour, why the hell wouldn't you take it? I guess isn't it then up to the government to do the deal properly? What I don't like about it is that it's been so hidden for so long. I think that's what leaves the nasty taste in the mouth, and we still don't know everything yet, and it's not. It's not good. I
think when you expect people to show integrity and respect codes of conduct and proper process, you're entitled to expect that from both sides, both the government and the people they're dealing with. But let me move on to Chris Bowen. I had a pretty good crack at him at the top of the program, and I want to get James's thoughts on. There's a lot to pick out, but let's go back to this particular comment from the Climate and Energy Minister.
We want an energy system that is stronger and doesn't cost consumers more. That's the test we've set, and that's the one we'll hold to.
So this bloke thinks this is the test. He's taken a cheap, reliable energy system, made it more unreliable and expensive than it's ever been. He's completely failed his own test.
I was going to say, yeah, if only we could think of a resource that's out there that's both incredibly reliable and also affordable. But, it's just not ever occurred to Chris Bowen. And he started that speech by saying, like, I get, this is a speech in Canberra, but it's not about Canberra. I've got to agree. I think that speech was 100% about Turkey. I think that was broadcasting. I'm Chris Bowen, and here's my big international message, and all of the Australian taxpayers who get left behind by this, they just have to suck it up.
Well, he had the Turkey climate guy there, and it was all about how Chris Bowen's going to save the planet. Bugger Australia, I'm saving the planet, and maybe I'll get myself a cushy UN job after my time in politics. He also had this to say about Tuvalu. Let's revisit this one.
I've stood at the most narrow point of Tuvalu and seen the impact of rising seas. Some people deny it. We know it's real. And the very existence of these countries is at stake.
Justin, this is just wrong. Tuvalu is getting bigger. And yet, when you stand on a low-lying island country, guess what? You can see the ocean and see that it's low-lying. But the science says it's getting bigger.
Well, look, I'm not going to answer to that particular location. I'll let you and Chris Bowen nut that one out. But you must admit that the climate does need saving. The planet does need some saving here. We need to do something. At least can the three of us agree that we can't go on the way that we're going on? Can we?
No.
I mean, you would agree with that the climate does need saving.
I don't agree that the climate needs saving. I agree that we need to look after our environment. I'm a former park ranger. I believe in looking after the environment. And I think we're spending way too much time trying to save the climate because guess what, mate? You can't save the climate. Hate to break it to you, but you can't do that.
So you don't believe climate change is real? Let's just clear it up here. You don't believe it's a real thing?
I'm doing the interviewing here. Look, I talk about this all the time, mate. Everybody knows that I follow science and I know that the climate has always changed and I know that human beings may be having a significant effect on that. Most likely an effect that's probably not as dramatic as many think. But we can't fix it, mate. Australia can't fix it. That's the science. That's what we have to get our head around, James. We destroy our economy pretending what we do is going to improve the climate. It won't.
It's so interesting that so many of the solutions to the climate problem are all about the most, just this toxic way of hurting us in the current because we think it's going to help our lives in the future. And it becomes almost evangelical. It's like the sins of the world are caused by coal, therefore we need to get rid of it now rather than investing in things that can, look, renewables are going to get cheaper, but the market is going to decide that. The market decides everything like that. The way the government can just cut off so many important resources.
James, and that's not going to happen straight away, mate. You've got to build into these things. It doesn't happen straight away.
The thing is, just
build into it. It costs so many people being able to afford their bills. Like they just get caught up in this. They don't get a voice.
Look, Justin, if you and Chris Bowen and Kevin Rudd and Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong
I'm
and
not on
Katie
Chris
Gallagher,
Bowen's side or Kevin Rudd's side. Don't pretend that I'm on their side. That's garbage argument. It's a rubbish argument.
Mate, if you all believe this tosh that we're all going to be swamped by boiling oceans and countries are going to disappear and it's going to be too hot to live, the thing you would be doing right now is trying to switch everything to nuclear power because it's there, it's ready, it's available. Instead, you're pretending around with virtue signalling bloody windmills.
We should look at it.
It's a joke, mate. You're sending us broke.
You're trying to turn my argument into You're trying to turn my argument into Chris Bowen's argument and Rudd's argument. That's not what I'm talking about. And you know that I've talked about nuclear before.
Your argument
is no problem with them. But your argument is idiotic. Should be looked at better.
Your argument is idiotic. You're trying to tell us.
What's idiotic about
You're trying to tell us that the climate's going to kill us and we can stop it. We can save it. It's just nonsensical. It's kindergarten stuff that we get from...
Human beings can save it. Human beings are able to save it. I'm not saying Australia... Of course Australia on its own is not going to be able to save it. Listen, if you're going to misquote me, make sure you do it with some of the right words, please.
I look forward to getting up to Beijing and getting China to save the planet. That'll be an interesting exercise. While we're on saving the planet... Of course, no one would fly. None of us would fly on holidays if we wanted to save the planet. But those people who are going to fly in the future on Jetstar, apparently going to have to pay about $50 to put a bag in the overhead lockers. Here's what the travellers are telling us about this idea today.
$50 from Sydney to Bali just to put bags in the overhead locker.
Oh, OK, that's definitely too much, yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, crazy.
I think that's pretty steep. Being a family-friendly value air flight, it's getting a bit more expensive, all the add-ons.
That's ridiculous, I reckon. Yeah, we pay enough for flights anyway. Yeah.
Do you think you'd still choose Jetstar if that was the case?
Probably not, no.
Gee, it would have saved Chappelle Corby a lot of trouble. She would have left the boogie board in Bali. What do you reckon?
What I don't like about this is it's going to encourage so many travellers to not put their luggage overhead but put it under the seat in front of them, which is then going to encourage them to shift their legs over into my leg area, and therefore it is going to encourage them to make my flight experience worse. So I've got a lot of problems with this idea.
Yeah, sad news. It's going to be good for Qantas, I'm afraid. It's going to become a monopoly. You can't fly on Virgin because they have dogs on board, and you can't fly on Jetstar because they're charging you to chuck stuff up there. So Qantas is the only option. Bloody hell, there we go.
This is how Chris Bowen wins in the end. It just makes so many different airlines have these awful policies to stop you flying.
Anyway,
Jetstar can get stuffed.
It won't affect you, Justin, because you're saving the planet. You won't be flying. You'll be riding your bike on holidays. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. We're right out of time.
Bugger off.
Justin and James, we're going to bugger off now and hand over to Peter Credlin. I'll see you tomorrow.